Welcome to the Haunted Peninsula podcast. Tonight we unveil the paranormal with demon folklorist, Victoria Jaye.
Thank you for joining us on the Haunted Peninsula for the Paranormal Unveiled podcast. I am Michael, and I will be interviewing demon folklorist Victoria Jaye. Welcome, Victoria, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You say in the introduction to your thesis that you openly believe in the supernatural. Tell us about the genesis of this belief, and does it have any boundaries?
I would say no, it doesn't have any boundaries because I think our world's a little stranger than even we believe, like people who do believe in the supernatural. It all started when I was a kid. I felt that I was just a little different, and I do have psychic abilities. When I was 4, I demonstrated the ability to tell when it was going to snow. I was like, Mommy, it's going to snow tomorrow. I had a dream about it. And she was like, okay, honey, because it was in England and it's not known for snow. So that was one of them. Another time, I felt it was okay to go to the park by myself at 3 years old because I felt a very comforting presence there with me. Yeah, so that really started it. And my mom is also psychic, and she pretty much guided me through all this. And as I got older, my experiences got stranger. At one time when I was at Warwick Castle in England, because I went back to visit, I saw a very tall shape pass by a window. At first I thought it was a person, and then I kept looking at it and realized that no other person was in that room. Then I went back to that part of the castle to go see what was going on over there. And I saw... Well, I didn't see, I felt a really evil presence and realized that room was actually cordoned off. Nobody was in that room. And this thing was a very dark shadow. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe a demon. So.
How did works like In a Dark Place, The Haunting, Satan's Harvest affect the way you see your work?
I suppose, there is always the question of, well, were the Warrens actually telling the truth about everything, or were they exaggerating? And the truth is, in folklore, it doesn't matter, because the story is true. When the story is true, it means that it's being told. So it's being told as if it were true. That's what we really measure in folklore. As far as my personal, how I looked at this, I felt there were a lot of similarities, not just with their stories, but with other things, because I read everything I could about demons and people who had had experiences with them, and I kept finding the same things. So if they were exaggerated, it is very strange that that's what keeps coming up. These things like rotting smells and blacker than night shadows and all of these things that seem to be the basis for a demonic experience. I'm not sure it matters whether they were fully telling the truth or not.
When we look at these events that you call memorits, or that have been referred to as memorits in your work, how do we distill the truth of experience from the more charlatan aspects of this that derive from pop culture, like the exorcism or 19th century spiritualism?
That's a good question. So memorats are people telling their accounts firsthand. That makes it slightly different than regular folklore, which is when somebody tells a story and it gets passed on and it changes and evolves every time someone tells it. So a memorat is like you telling this story. This happened to me, to another person. And as far as media has really muddied the water of what is true about demons. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of people come to me after my thesis was posted online being like, I think I had a demon experience. I want to talk to you about it. I'm like, of course. Tell me all about it. And then I find out that their experience is not actually a demon, because demons have markers and things that they specifically do in almost every haunting, not every single one. And I shouldn't use the word haunting, more like infestation. It was easy to see where people had gotten these ideas. For instance, like The Exorcist, people would be like, oh, well, I felt a negative evil presence. It must be a demon. And that also comes from paranormal TV shows, people going into a house and immediately calling something a demon. I have had to tell many people, like, not every evil spirit is a demon. That comes from pop culture. Like, there's been a lot done on other types.
Not every bump in the night is a ghost.
Yep, exactly.
Your lexicon includes words like demon versus devil, inhuman spirit, encroachment, infestation, and memorits, which we just talked about. Can you go into some detail on these terms that you use?
Sure.
Spend quite a bit of time differentiating demon from devil based on the history of the words.
Demon versus devil. Demon came first. It came from the Greek daemon, which meant something a lot different than how we use it now. When it came into Old Vulgate, it turned into what it is now. So that was like Middle English. But devil is something that is actually used in the Warrens' work quite a bit. They consider it to be like a hierarchy of demons, which anybody involved with demonic work knows that there is a hierarchy in heaven just as there is in hell. A devil would be something a lot more intelligent, like a supervisor. Ed Warren talks about that in one of his books. While a demon is a lower class spirit. They're not running the show. They're just basically following orders. As far as my research goes, I didn't find devil to be helpful because I couldn't prove that something was a more intelligent spirit based off the memorats I was reading. I use mostly demon because it's what our culture understands as far as what this thing is, even though most of that understanding comes from pop culture. And then inhuman spirit, I use that one quite a bit, just so I wasn't saying demon every 5 seconds. And then, yeah, an inhuman spirit is just simply something that is not human and never has been human. Demons in their memorats prove themselves to be greater than humans and what they can do. They are inhumanly strong and they don't appear like us. Even when they appear as human beings, I think I heard of one where there was a little boy, I think maybe in the Amityville haunting, where it appeared as a little boy and they caught a picture of it and its eyes were wrong. But that's actually kind of a bad one, just because Amityville is regarded as a hoax. So they don't fully appear as us, is my point. Because they're so far from being human that I think even the illusion breaks down, because they're not us.
In your work, you discuss something called an NSC. How do you differentiate what you call an NSC from other experiences?
So a negative supernatural experience is really... because there are such things as what we call in the folklore world sunny supernatural. This would be like maybe your grandmother who had passed away, you felt her presence nearby. Or you felt a very good thing that's like almost religious, but it was definitely supernatural in nature. Because supernatural and religious tend to have a lot of overlap. If you had a negative supernatural experience, what that really means is that something supernatural happened and it wasn't a good thing. So that's how I would differentiate. But a negative supernatural experience versus a demonic experience, there are a couple different things that you need to be checking off. Like, my classification system is meant to be a checklist. Had a demonic experience in there, or they think it was a demon, and they came to my work and was like, oh, so what sort of things happen with demons? It's a full list of all the things that have been reported, at least in the Warrens' work. It can be expanded, and I will probably expand it much later, to include other works that I have seen, demonic phenomena that wasn't in there before. So they can go through and be like, oh, yeah, this happened to me. So did this. This too. That's one way. Another way is that If you do not feel when you are in the presence of this thing that it is pure evil, that it wants to hurt you, then it probably is not a demon. Also, it will be overpowering how strong that feeling is. Because spirits can be evil, including human spirits, or once human. It's one of those things like, did you feel the presence of evil? No. It's like a flow chart. Then probably not a demon. Did you feel the presence of evil? Yes, probably a demon. But
Do you
then
think that all people have the ability to perceive these things?
I do, simply because they're so wrong to the way that we perceive life, I suppose. Because once a demon has entered somebody's life and starts to manifest and starts to do the first stage, which is infestation. Well, technically, the first stage is encroachment, but infestation is when you really start to notice because they'll start throwing things. They will start tormenting you. I think that
We were talking about encroachment versus infestation, and the degree to which the average person is sensitive
yes,
to these events. Do we have to have a special sense, as you've described yourself having, to appreciate an encroachment, an infestation, a NSC?
I think for certain types of paranormal experiences, yes, people do have to have some type of psychic sense because it's the first alarm bell that goes off. People who are not particularly what I call sensitive to the supernatural do not always pick up on it at first. When it's a demon, they will make you aware, whether you're sensitive or not. But what I call psychic ability would be, let's say you walk into a room and you know it's there. You don't know how you know it's there, but it is. And you can feel how evil it is and how wrong it is to our human experience. And then you walk away from that room and you feel better. That would be the ability to sense presences, like supernatural, spiritual ones, right? But when infestation happens, it is so unable to be ignored. Though, in a lot of narratives, people will ignore it because they don't want to believe that something supernatural is happening because they don't believe. But eventually usually it's like they feel it first, then they start hearing things, and then maybe smells join in. And then they finally see something and then go, oh, okay, I think something supernatural is happening here. Because it's not uncommon for people to want to ignore this and hope it goes away. But a demon will make sure that you cannot ignore this. It will not go away.
What do these events tell us about ourselves in a phenomenological sense? For example, you mentioned the succubi and the incubi. In our present knowledge attributes these demons to an artifact of something called sleep paralysis.
David Hufford he was probably like the supernatural pioneer besides Barbara Walker in the folklore field because he had an experience with sleep paralysis and he saw something. He decided to start interviewing hundreds of people and he put it into a book called The Terror That Comes in the Night. And it is like a fairly scary book, and I think there is overlap with demonic experiences and sleep paralysis experiences, but I cannot prove that. So I didn't include it in my thesis. These sort of instances are cataloged across every country, just in different ways. I know in Newfoundland, they for sure called it the old hag, like the hag riding you and sitting on you and cutting off your airway, and it usually meant there was a witch who wanted to harm you for some reason in that community. And one of the ways you got rid of it was to pee in a bottle, and that for some reason meant, okay, I am mitigating this problem. So folk belief comes out of these experiences because first we have the experience, we don't know how to explain it, and then our culture fills in the gaps and then tells stories about it.
So what we're talking about here in a broad sense, is really folklore. I mean, when we look at a movie like The Witch, which is one of my favorites,
It's a great movie.
and, and I believe you mentioned it on your webpage. I mean, you see the embodiment of anxieties and terrors felt by settlers in a strange world, through a Puritan view. But if we strip this away, if we strip these structures of understanding that are imparted on us by culture, what are we left with?
We're left with the experience itself. And
this is your list. This is your classification system.
Yeah. So if there were more classification systems, I've thought about doing some for jinn, for UFOs.
Explain to us what jinn is. I see you reference that, but I'm not sure everyone knows what jinn means.
So jinn is spelled either D-J-I-N-N or J-I-N-N. They are often equated with genies, but they are not genies. They are a belief from Muslim folklore that these creatures were created at the same time as angels and humans. Angels were made of light, humans made of clay, and jinn were made of smokeless fire. So really just fire. They are similar to humans in that they have free will, and they also are a little bit more powerful. Like, they're said to be a little bit bigger than humans, and they exist in the air. So they exist in a different realm than we do. It's hard to say why they were created, but supposedly they're there. They are often like, I've gone through different web pages where people were like, yeah, I had an experience with a jinn, and then they said what it was. And I was like, that sounds a little bit more like an incubus, but perhaps there's overlap between an incubus and a jinn. Maybe these things are all the same creature. But
it's interesting because you write about a moment of reflection when you applied your classification system to your own experience on your webpage. Can you describe that to us?
Sure. I thought I had had a demonic experience, but when I actually went through the data, I realized it was not one, because it didn't have almost any of the factors that I had laid out in my system. It was different. It was related to mirrors, of all things. I had a mirror pointed at my bed for a few years, and then, because what happened was I was broken down by a spirit psychologically, and then I was put to sleep in a hospital. I'm pretty sure they thought I was on drugs. And I woke up and something was in there with me. I was simply watching. I couldn't control anything I did. This thing was cruel and it was smug, but it wasn't evil. And I think if for it to be a demonic experience in that respect, it would have had to feel evil. And it didn't. And it said something stupid to my parents about, like, oh, I'm not your kid or whatever. And it's like, what? So it was just, whatever this thing was, it was a liar, clearly. That was the main thing, because for my thesis, I had to go back through my own experiences and talk to my mom and my sister and my dad about it, because they were there, and ask them questions that I hadn't really ever wanted to delve deeper into, and realize that a lot of my experience was not right to my own eyes, since getting the crap kicked out of me didn't happen, but bruises showed up as if it did. So whatever this thing was, it had the ability to make me believe that I was being possessed by a demon. But I had actually just read the Warrens' book right before this. So maybe there was a little bit of overlap with stress and what this thing wanted to pretend it was. But it's hard to say. That's all speculation on my part. All I know is that my experience did not line up with what I laid out in my classification system. This was something else. And something that really hammered that home was another girl who contacted me from, I think, Costa Rica. She had had a similar experience, and she did have mirrors near her bed. And mirrors in the occult world are known for being portals. That made me go, oh, this was something else. And maybe this thing was once human. So I personally think it might have been a Dybbuk, which is a spirit from Jewish folklore where they are barred from heaven and hell. They wander and they look for bodies to possess. It's hard to say how accurate these things are because most Dybbuk experiences came to us, I believe, from the 19th century. That could be wrong. It was from a certain period of time of unrest. That's the best I can do for now as far as what my own experience is. I'm still looking, still trying to figure it out. I don't think it was a demon. Not at all
That's
anymore.
interesting. I have a friend who very credibly described seeing a demon emerge from another person. How do you see that event? What does that tell you?
I personally think that was an experience where somebody saw a demon emerge just so that that demon could mess with the other person and terrify them. Because that's really what seems to power them, our fear of them and how unlike us they are. Because really, if you look even at horror movies, anything that is unlike us terrifies us on some level. So it doing that seems like a scare tactic or even maybe a warning. But I'm actually not a possession expert. I'm more focused on infestation and oppression. But from everything that I do know about possession, that's what it seems like. Like it was literally just wanting to mess with your friend and terrify him.
I'd like to go back to the subject of folklore.
Mm-hmm.
You are the folklorist in this sense. Can you again tell us the context of folklore in your work and how we look at these subjects through the lens of folklore? Are we creating folklore now by discussing these things?
I would say yes, because folklore is ever evolving. And somebody who might hear this podcast might take some of the ideas and then some of their own ideas and create something new, a new story to tell. So I would say we are creating folklore, but as far as my work goes, folklore is the basis of all of our fun stories. It provides context. It explains why we are the way that we are. Why, when we see a dark figure, we tell an entire tale about it. We'll tell the experience first, and then culture will fill in the gaps with, oh, that was this. And it was because you did this. It's because people are looking for an answer. They want to feel safe in their knowledge of what this thing is and what it can do and why this is happening to them. Because as anybody who's ever had a supernatural experience knows, there's nothing about the supernatural that exactly makes us feel safe. It more often makes us feel like we don't actually know what's going on with our world because there seem to be other worlds, or at least another realm of being that these things are punching a hole through ours to be here.